The radio hissed with static till his own voice poured through the speaker, rapping lines he had never written about a future he hadn't lived yet. Detroit's winter sat heavy on the windows, pressing its cold palm to the glass and daring the house to breathe. Somewhere in the kitchen, the heater clicked and muttered. Somewhere in the street, a distant siren stitched a crooked line through the dark. Marshall couldn't sleep. The kind of restlessness that used to send him to a notebook now sent him walking room to room. Like if he kept moving, the night would lose his trail. He ended up in the garage, where the concrete still kept memories from another life, oil stains, a bent bicycle rim, a milk crate full of cables. On a shelf near the fuse box sat the radio. It had the weight of an older decade. Wood case, glass dial, amber pilot light, clouded like an old eye. He didn't remember buying it. Maybe it came with the house. Maybe it followed him. He plugged it in. The pilot light thought about it, then glowed. When he twisted the knob, the speaker coughed dust and static, the sound of 1,000 tiny storms. He moved the dial slow. Stations rose and fell. Midnight sports, a preacher scolding an audience he couldn't see, Motown ghosts slipping between frequencies like they were still owed one more verse. He almost turned it off. Then the static thinned. A beat surfaced, no drums at first, just a measure of air that carried rhythm anyway. He leaned closer, breath fogging the dusty face of the dial. A voice came through. It was his, not a sample, not a recording he'd forgotten. His present tense voice, rapping lines he'd never written, landing syllables in the pocket of a beat he couldn't hear and somehow felt in his ribs. The words weren't about the past. They were about now, about the garage, about a man standing too close to a radio at 3:13 in the morning, hoodie up, hands cold. He looked at the time, 3:13. The numbers glowed back from his phone like they'd been waiting for him to notice. If you're listening, take 3 steps back, the voice said, his voice through the speaker. He did, before his brain approved the decision. A second later, the bulb over his head flickered and popped, showering the floor with 2 bright flecks of glass where he'd been standing. The timing was too clean to be chance. His breath hitched. He searched the shadows for cameras, mics, neighbors with a sick sense of humor. The garage gave him only the shapes of sleeping tools and a shallow cold. The radio cleared its throat with a wash of static and continued. You left the milk crate by the wall, it said, top left. A cassette adapter with the wire frayed. He stared at the crate and, sure enough, found the adapter exactly where the voice said it would be. Copper intestines peeking through black insulation. Don't plug that in, the voice added, almost amused. Not tonight. The laugh that tried to get out of his chest died halfway. Who is this? He asked the room, then felt stupid for asking a box. His own voice on the radio answered anyway. You're tuned to the last broadcast, it said. Same frequency, same hour, until the song ends. He tried the practical route. He lifted his phone, hit record, and pointed the mic at the speaker. The voice kept talking, clear as a confession names details. A memory about the 7th step on the back porch that creaked because he'd always skipped it. When he hit stop and replayed the file, the recording gave him nothing but a soft hiss. His voice was gone, erased like a bad idea. Cute, he muttered. You won't capture this, the box told him. You have to hear it while it's happening. That's the tax. The hair on his arms lifted under the hoodie. If you're me, he said, say something only I would know. 4th grade, the radio said, without pausing. You broke your pencil on purpose because you couldn't finish the poem. You hid your hands under the desk so no one would see you shake. On the way home, you told yourself if you ever had a voice, you'd spend it all at once. You've been keeping that promise so hard you forgot who you were promising. He closed his eyes, felt the garage fold smaller around him. What do you want? Not want, the broadcast corrected gently. Warn. The pilot light pulsed, once, brighter, as if to underline the word. Outside, a car passed, tires whispering on frozen asphalt. Inside, the garage gave him the shape of a man in a radio talking to a man in a hoodie. At 3:19, the voice said, "A red truck's going to blow the stop at the corner. You'll hear it before you see it. Don't open the side door. If you do, glass." He stared at the side door window, a thin sheet that rattled when the wind got ideas. The part of him that had spent a life ignoring advice stood up to argue. The part of him that had almost been under a falling light earlier in his story said, "Maybe shut up and listen." Also, the voice added, "Call Paul at 3:27. He won't pick up." "That's the point." "Why?" he asked. "So you remember." "Who didn't answer?" the box said, calm as weather. He paced once, twice. "If you're me, where are you?" It felt wrong, asking. It felt worse not to. On the other side of the song, it said, "Don't rush it. You'll get here, or you won't." The dial's glass caught his reflection. A tired man bending over an old machine as if it could tell him how to keep breathing. The static thickened, then fell away again. "You don't have to trust me," the broadcast said, almost kind. "You already will." He checked the time. 3:18. Somewhere in the house, a pipe clanged, the heater sighed. Farther out, a dog barked twice, then thought better of it. He kept his eyes on the side door and forced his feet to stay still. The radio hummed low. "You were going to write tonight," it said. "You told yourself if it didn't come easy, you'd force it. That's why you came out here." That notebook, in the kitchen drawer, third page in from the back. You tore it out a month ago. Told yourself you'd stop letting paper decide if the voice was real. You put it back anyway. He pictured the drawer. He pictured the page with its soft tear. Scar, the part of him that wanted to go check, didn't move. He'd learned something about following orders tonight, and he wasn't sure he liked the lesson. "Time," the broadcast said softly. "Wait." He waited. The house counted seconds with him. At 3:19, a red truck blew the stop at the corner. He didn't see it, but the sound painted the picture. Engine too eager, tires skidding, a dull thud farther down as some innocent object paid the toll for someone else's rush. The glass in the side door trembled, but held. He let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been saving. "Okay," he said, not to the radio, but to the part of him that had wanted to rush the door just to prove no one could tell him what to do. The voice didn't gloat. "You're still here," it said. "That's the whole job." His phone buzzed in his pocket. A notification he didn't remember allowing. A calendar alert with no calendar attached. 3:27, it said. "Call Paul." He stared at the screen and wondered. What would happen if he ignored it? He knew the answer. He always knew the answer. He just didn't always like it. "You're going to ask if I'm a loop," the broadcast said. "You're going to worry this is a trap." It is and it isn't. Most cages are just consequences with better marketing. He huffed a humorless laugh. "You sound like me when I'm trying to sound like I don't care. I sound like you when you actually don't," it said. He paced again, twice around the workbench. When he stopped, he found his fingertips resting lightly on the radio's speaker cloth. as if he could feel the words through the fabric. He pulled his hand back, embarrassed at being caught touching something that couldn't touch him back. "You want a bigger proof?" the voice said, reading the urge he hadn't admitted yet. "Open the glove box in the car. There's a receipt. You never found. The name on it isn't yours. Keep it. You'll need it." He hesitated, then moved toward the driver's door. His keys were already in his coat pocket, his coat somehow already around his shoulders, as if he'd put it on while listening and didn't remember doing it. He opened the car, the dome light, painting everything in weak yellow. The glove box clicked open. Receipts, napkins, a pen that didn't work in winter. He shuffled through and found it. A receipt from a late-night gas station. Wrong date, right mileage, and a signature that mumbled a name he didn't know he knew. He slid it into his wallet without letting himself think. When he looked back at the radio, the pilot light's glow had turned steady, like it had finally decided on a heartbeat. 3:27. The box reminded him. He called Paul. The phone rang out to voicemail like the voice said it would. He didn't leave a message. He just listened to the empty line, to the background hum of a life he could not control, and then he hung up. The radio's static rose like tide, then settled. "You're going to want to ask me about tomorrow," it said softly. "Don't you won't like the answer. One day at a time is not a slogan. It's a safety." He swallowed, nodded, felt stupid for nodding. In 10 minutes, the broadcast continued. "The heater in the kitchen is going to kick hard. It'll knock the spoon off the counter. You'll think it's nothing, and you'll be right. Not everything is a sign." The voice paused, letting the static carry the rest. "What happens if I change something?" he asked. "If I do the opposite of what you say, you'll still arrive," the voice said. "You'll just bleed more on the way." He stood there, with the cold moving through his shoes and the radio telling him about a life that belonged to him and also didn't. The hour felt like a door held open by a patient hand. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked before he could stop. The words, "If there's a tomorrow," the broadcast said, "if you keep listening." The dial hissed. The pilot light dimmed. The frequency thinned until it was only weather again, then nothing. He waited 30 seconds he couldn't afford, then another 30 he couldn't explain. The silence stayed. In the kitchen, the heater kicked hard. Something metal tapped the floor. He almost laughed. He unplugged the radio and carried it inside like a sleeping animal. On the way through the hall, his phone vibrated once. More notification this time, just a nudge. He checked the time, 3:44. Too late for everything, too early for anything. He left the radio on the counter, pilot light still faintly warm. Under his palm, before he turned off the kitchen light, he caught his reflection in the window glass. For half a breath, the mouth on the reflected face finished a word he wasn't speaking. It looked like soon. He stared until the glass was only glass again, upstairs. The bed would be cold. That was fine. He didn't plan to sleep. Not with a frequency in his head and a voice that wore his bones promising to call back. He left the radio where it could find him. The radio sat on the counter like it belonged there, wood casing humming faint heat through the palm of his hand. Marshall hadn't touched it since dragging it in from the garage, but every time he passed the kitchen he felt pulled sideways, like gravity had been reprogrammed. He told himself he'd leave it alone. He told himself a lot of things. At 3:10 a.m., he was already back in the chair, hoodie up, waiting for the glow. The pilot light stirred awake, amber bleeding through dust. Static hissed low, a whisper of storms trapped in the speaker cloth. He leaned closer, still here, The voice, said his voice, means you listened last night. Marshall's skin prickled. If I hadn't, you wouldn't be hearing this. He swallowed. His throat was dry from hours of silence, the kind that made you second guess every sound. What's next then? Another warning. The voice chuckled, a rasp of familiarity. You want to treat this like a game, like a canned response. It isn't. This is rehearsal. Static swelled, then thinned again. Tonight, 3:19, the front porch. Don't open the door until you hear 3 knocks. Any sooner and you'll let the wrong one in. Marshall turned his head toward the hallway. The front door sat in shadow, waiting like it already knew its cue. He forced himself to stay put, eyes locked on the glowing dial. You think you're choosing, the voice continued. But choice is just choreography. You step where the floor holds, or you fall. He clenched his jaw. You sound like me when I hate myself. I sound like you when you finally listen. The house groaned with settling wood. He checked his phone. 3:17. He hated how fast the minutes bled when the radio spoke. The hum pressed deeper into the room, filling his chest like an extra heartbeat. Then came the sound, a shuffle on the porch boards, a shadow crossing behind the frosted glass. His stomach tightened. The first knock came, dull, deliberate. The second, harder, faster. The third, soft, almost gentle. He stood and gripped the knob. Something behind him, his static rising sharp. The voice from the radio snapped. Now, he flung the door open. The porch was empty. Only cold night, wind rattling the gutter, snow dust spiraling under the street lamp. He stepped out, scanning left-right, silence. Then he saw it. On the top step sat a cassette tape. No case, labeled blank. He bent, picked it up. The plastic was warm, almost pulsing. Behind him, the radio spoke louder, words cutting through the night air, though the door was still open. Play it, but not on anything new. Use the deck in the basement. Only that. Marshall clenched the tape, jaw tight. He slammed the door shut and stalked back to the kitchen. What the hell is this? You feeding me breadcrumbs? Call it memory, the voice said. Call it dead. He shoved the tape into his pocket and killed the radio with a twist of the knob. The pilot light blinked out. For a second, he thought that would silence everything. But as he turned away, his phone buzzed in his hoodie. He pulled it free. No missed call, no text. Just his calendar app, glowing with a single note. Basement, 3:44. He stared until the numbers blurred. He didn't remember setting the reminder. He didn't remember giving the radio permission to crawl this far into his life. The house felt tighter now. Every corner listening. He gripped the tape harder. And somewhere in the walls, too. Faint to be real, he swore he heard his own voice humming a beat that hadn't been written yet. The tape sat on the counter all day like a dare, silent and ordinary. Marshall couldn't stop glancing at its blank label, plastic scratched from years it shouldn't have survived, reels frozen like they were holding their breath. Every time he reached for it, his chest tightened and he pulled back. By evening, he hated himself for letting an inch of plastic own his head. At 3:40 a.m., the calendar alert buzzed again. Basement, 3:44. He stared at the screen, then at the tape, then at the dark stairwell yawning at the end of the hall. The basement smelled of damp wood and rust. He flicked the light string, bulb buzzing weak above. Against the far wall sat the old deck, stacked with dust, its silver face dulled with time. He hadn't touched it in years. He set the tape down, stared at it like it might bite. The radio's voice still echoed in his memory. Play it, but not on anything new. Only that his hands moved on their own. He slid the cassette into the deck, pressed play. The gears groaned, reels turning with reluctant breath. Static filled the basement. Then a beat crept through slow, familiar, but wrong. He felt it in his chest like Deja vu. And then came the voice, his own rapping, but not words he'd ever written. Verses, sharp and merciless, painting pictures of nights that hadn't happened yet, streets he hadn't walked, choices he hadn't made. Each bar cut into him with the weight of inevitability. He stumbled back, hand gripping the railing. What the hell is this? The tape didn't care. The voice flowed smooth, flawless. Then one line froze him. At 3:52, don't look at the stairs. He's already standing there. His pulse spiked. He checked his phone. 3:51. He forced himself to turn toward the stairs. They were empty, just wood and shadow. He laughed once, bitter, shaking his head. Got me, he muttered, though the words scraped dry. The deck wind, reels spinning faster. The voice rose, almost shouting now. Don't look, don't look. The bulb above popped, plunging him into half-dark. He spun back to the stairs. Stamped, his stomach dropped. Someone stood there, a hooded figure, frozen in the doorway, face shadowed. But the shape was unmistakable. Shoulders, height, stance. It was him. Marshall stumbled backward, hitting the table. The tape still played, his voice pounding through the speaker. Verses overlapping like echoes from another life. The figure at the stairs lifted its head slowly. The light from the phone in his hand caught a sliver of the face. His own eyes stared back, cold and certain. The cassette clicked, reels stopping. The voice cut out mid-syllable. Silence pressed against the basement. The figure spoke without moving. Its lips, the words rattling inside Marshall's skull. You already knew this part. The silence in the basement pressed like weight. Dust hung in the air, each speck glowing faint in the dying light bulb. Marshall's chest heaved, every breath ragged. The figure at the top of the stairs didn't move, yet the air seemed to bend around it, like the house itself held its breath. Say something, Marshall hissed, voice scraping low. The figure tilted its head. In the dim glow of his phone, the face emerged his own. Same scars, same tired lines, same eyes, only colder, unblinking. The hooded double-stepped down one stair, wood groaning under its weight. Marshall's phone vibrated in his hand. He glanced at the screen, no call, no text, just words glowing across the cracked glass. Don't let him finish. The figure's lips parted. His own voice came out, perfect and sharp, filling the basement without a mic. It was a verse Marshall had never written, but it came from his chest anyway, like it had been stolen straight from his lungs. Every line hit two personal fights with his mother, the day he almost quit, the nights when silence almost swallowed him whole. Marshall staggered, palms clamped to his ears, but the words still carved inside him. The double descended another step, spitting each bar with flawless rhythm, each syllable a nail in the coffin. Shut up, Marshall roared, grabbing the cassette deck from the table and hurling it across the room. It smashed against the wall, reels snapping free, but the voice didn't stop. The double kept rapping, steady and merciless, as if the lyrics were carved into the walls. Marshall's throat ached. He picked up his own voice like a weapon and fired back raw, jagged bars, ripped from scars that still bled. The basement shook with the collision. Words slammed into each other, verses overlapping. Two identical voices battling for air. The bulb overhead burst, glass raining. Darkness swallowed them both, but the double's voice glowed in the dark, every rhyme sparking like static. Marshall forced himself forward, fists clenched, spitting until his throat tore. His voice cracked but refused to break. The words turned primal, stripped of polish, just pain and fire. The double paused mid-bar, smirk visible in the dim afterglow. "You're fading," it said, voice now a whisper that still filled the room. "One of us has to end, and you already know who it is." Marshall's phone buzzed again. A new line crawled across the screen. Final verse, choose now. His chest heaved, lungs burning, voice frayed. He stared at the figure, his own face twisted with certainty, rapping lines he hadn't yet lived. The basement walls groaned, pipes rattling, dust sifting down like ash. Marshall roared one last verse. Words torn from the deepest corner of his life, words he'd never planned to speak. The floor shuddered. The shadows recoiled. For the first time, the double flinched, its cadence faltering. Marshall took a step up the stairs, voice still pounding. The double staggered back, smirk flickering into something almost human - fear. The phone screen blazed white. Finale begins. The basement shivered with every echo, words ricocheting off concrete like bullets. Marshall's throat burned raw, sweat soaking through his hoodie, but his voice still pushed out, jagged and alive. Across from him, the double stood firm on the steps, lips curling into verses smoother, sharper, like they'd been waiting years for this stage. The phone in Marshall's palm blazed white, brighter than any bulb. Across the cracked glass, one line pulsed. Only one voice leaves. The double smirked, spitting flawless rhymes that twisted Marshall's own life into weapons. The day he almost quit. The scars he hid under long sleeves. The nights when silence felt heavier than breath. Every bar stabbed deeper, each syllable too precise to fight. Marshall roared back, voice tearing from his chest. The rhymes weren't clean, but they were his ugly, scarred, unpolished. Every syllable came like a fist thrown in desperation, but desperation carried truth. The words collided in the dark, sparks showering from the air itself, static turning the shadows into a storm. The double staggered. Just once, its verse hiccuped. Its face flickered, glitching between verging and angry, old and hollow, smiling too late. Marshall pressed forward, climbing the stairs one heavy step at a time, voice refusing to die. His throat felt like it was splitting, but he screamed. Through it, lines shaking the basement walls until dust rained down. The double faltered again. The smirk cracked. "You can't erase me," it hissed. But for the first time, the words wavered. Marshall's phone pulsed once more. Finish the verse. He sucked in the ragged air and let it out as his final line, raw, jagged, undeniable. "This is my life, my stage, my voice." The shadows recoiled like smoke sucked through a vent. The double convulsed its features, tearing apart into static. Its scream was his own voice, shredded, stretched thin, before collapsing into silence. The figure dissolved into black dust that vanished between the stairs. The basement fell still. Marshall stood alone, chest heaving, voice gone ragged. He dropped to his knees, gripping the railing until his knuckles burned. The phone dimmed, its glow fading to nothing. The cracked screen showed one last line, faint as a whisper. Finale complete. "Thank you for listening." He dropped it. It clattered against the floor, dead. The radio upstairs hummed once, low and distant, as if satisfied. He staggered too. His feet climbed the stairs and pushed open the basement door. The kitchen greeted him with ordinary silence. The old radio sat on the counter, pilot light dark. For a moment, he believed it was over. Then the dial clicked by itself. The pilot light flared amber. Static hissed soft, rising like a tide. His reflection in the microwave door turned its head half a second late. Its lips shaped one word he hadn't spoken. Encore. The light bulb above him burst, plunging the kitchen into black.